you take a sip of an ice-cold Coke Zero Sugar, you know you're getting real Coca-Cola taste you love, and with zero sugar. It's so delicious, you can almost taste it with your ears. Hear those bubbles? Imagine them tingling on your tongue. Fizzy deliciousness. Listen to that cascading liquid. It's unmistakably tasty. All with zero sugar. Crisp, refreshing, and ice cold. Ah, Coke Zero Sugar. Real Coca-Cola taste. Zero sugar.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ray Review, back with another dark story. Today, we're looking at the story of Jennifer Kesse, who disappeared in 2006 under incredibly mysterious circumstances, and she's never been seen since. It's a disappearance that just refuses to settle. No matter how many years pass, no matter how many times it's revisited, this story is defined by absence, by silence, and by a few critical moments that were never fully seen. Before we go any further, there's something I have to confess, that I personally don't love missing person cases or unsolved mysteries. I was always more of a cold case files person, less of an unsolved stories person. I'm not going to ick someone else's ooh, but that's just where I fall on the spectrum. Unsolved stories to me always feel like there is a profound lack of justice for the victims and the families, because I feel that part of justice is having a resolution, whether that's good or bad, but something that you can build off of. And sometimes having hope and creating something from that is a kind of torture in and of itself. But with my feelings aside, it doesn't make these stories any less important to tell, because these stories deserve to be heard. And interestingly, there are going to be gaps in this story, but we're not going to rush past them, because the gaps are actually where the story lives. I'm sure you're asking, what does that mean? Well, it's because there is one moment in this case that investigators return to, even after 20 years later now. And it's a moment that lasts 3 seconds, 3 frames, 3 chances to see a face. And somehow, in all 3 of those frames, the most important detail was blocked. And that's not symbolic, that is literal, that is real. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story of Jennifer Kesse. So before we start, a quick reminder, I tell a lot of dark, disturbing stories on this channel, and they all matter, but they can be heavy, so please be sure to listen and watch with care. But if you like spoken true crime stories that make you think, subscribe to Ray Review Dark Stories so you're notified when a new story drops, and give this story a like because engagement helps the channel tremendously. If you'd rather listen than watch, you can subscribe to Ray Review Dark Stories wherever you get podcasts. And if you want more, you can subscribe to my newsletter on Substack, where I will email you more stories, editorials, and you get early access to certain videos and a private chat. And you can find all of that at rayreview.com. But mostly, thank you for being here and for letting me guide you through these stories. So without further ado, let's get into the story of Jennifer Kesse. So let's set the scene a little bit. Who is Jennifer Kesse, and, where are we at the moment? So Jennifer Kesse is a 24-year-old woman. It is January of 2006, and we are in Florida. What was Jennifer like? Well, she was really responsible. She had kind of the world at her fingertips. She had a really bright future ahead of her, it seems like. And she was building a life. She worked as a finance manager in Central Florida Investments. She had recently purchased her own condo in Orlando, and she was close to her parents. She had a long-term boyfriend and was rooted in a life that had become stable and ordinary and unremarkable in the best way. I think we undervalue boring, or often peace is confused for boredom. I think that may be a larger issue that we need to address, but we're not going to do that today. Point being that Jennifer was dependable and organized and careful, and her life had become predictable. She was laying the foundations of her life. Her friends and family knew that she would call if she said that she was going to call, and she showed up when she was expected, her routines were boring in the best way possible. Now, the reason I'm really driving this point home is because it's significant and it means something when those patterns are broken, especially when they're broken suddenly and abruptly. The silence speaks volumes, and it speaks loudly. So here is when things stop making sense. What you're about to hear isn't a story about chaos or recklessness. It's a story about a normal routine that was never finished. So let's walk through the timeline of Jennifer Kesse's last few days. So, the last normal day was Sunday, January 22nd, 2006. Jennifer had just returned from vacation. She had gone to St. Croix with her boyfriend. There were no reported arguments or tension. There were no signs of trouble. She spends the night at his place, and everything, by all accounts, were normal. And that's important because when people disappear, one of the first questions you ask is, was something wrong before? Here, the answer appears to be no. The next morning is Monday, January 23rd, and it is the last day that anyone sees Jennifer Kesse. Jennifer drives directly from her boyfriend's home to work. She leaves around 6 p.m., as usual. At approximately 6:15, she speaks to her father on the phone while driving home. And that's the last time any family member hears her voice. Later that night, around 10 p.m., she spoke to her boyfriend. They say goodnight. There's no distress in her voice, no urgency, and no hesitation. And that call becomes the final confirmed interaction anyone ever has with Jennifer Kesse. At this point, nothing seems wrong, and that's exactly why what happens next is so unsettling. It's now Tuesday morning, January 24th. Jennifer is due at work. Jennifer always calls her boyfriend before work, but she doesn't show up at work, and her boyfriend didn't receive a call. So he calls her instead, but it went straight to voicemail. He tries to call her again and again, but Jennifer doesn't pick up, and Jennifer doesn't show up for work. And by late morning, her employer contacts her parents. Jennifer was not a no-call, no-show person, ever. So this is the moment when concern really turns into alarm. So what is going on at Jennifer's condo? Her parents drive from Tampa to Orlando. When they arrive at Jennifer's condo, what they find is unsettling precisely because of how normal it looks. The condo seems undisturbed. Her bed looks slept in, but there's a wet towel, there's clothes laid out for work, there's no signs of struggle, and no forced entry. But Jennifer is gone, and so is her car, which is a black 2004 Chevrolet Malibu. An uncomfortable truth is that a lot of real-life disappearances don't look dramatic at first. They look unfinished. Now here is the decision that kind of changed the trajectory of this case. So the police are called, but because Jennifer is an adult and there are no immediate signs of a crime, there's hesitation from the police, and the condo is not treated as a crime scene. At the time, this decision doesn't seem catastrophic, but later it turns out that it was. So let's talk about Jennifer's car a little bit. Jennifer disappears Tuesday, but 2 days later, on Thursday, January 26th, a resident at another apartment complex recognizes Jennifer's car from the news. It had been parked there for 2 days, just 1 mile away from her condo. When they looked in the car, there were no apparent signs of struggle, but there were things that were missing. The things that were missing were Jennifer's phone, her keys, her purse, her briefcase, her iPod, and the clothes that she was wearing. The car also appeared to be wiped down, and a scent dog later tracks a trail from the car back towards Jennifer's condo complex. And this is where the case changes forever. Let's talk about those 3 seconds that I mentioned earlier. So Jennifer's car is in a parking lot, and it has been for 2 days. Surveillance footage shows what becomes one of the most haunting visuals in modern missing persons cases. Around noon on January 24th, a person parks Jennifer's car, exits calmly, and walks away. And what has to be either the best or worst timing, depending on how you look at it, the person just happens to be walking by a fence. The camera snaps an image every 3 seconds, and in all 3 images, the person's face is perfectly obscured by the vertical bars of the fence. Not blurred, not distorted, just blocked. Now, this seems unbelievable, but investigators from law enforcement, the FBI, even NASA have attempted to enhance the footage of this person walking, but all they can determine is an approximate height, somewhere between 5'3" and 5'5". The gender's inconclusive. There's no visible panic from the person, no rush, and no hesitation. They are calm as a cucumber. So let's break down the theories and the missteps in this case. This is usually the point in a case where the theories start to multiply. And if you're familiar with this story, you probably already know them. Was it the boyfriend? Was it a stranger? Someone from work? Someone watching her routine? A crime of opportunity? None of the major theories in this case have ever fully held, not because they're impossible, but because the investigation never had the kind of early clarity that allows these theories to be tested properly. And that's important to understand, because when evidence is thin, speculation rushes in to fill the space. Jennifer's boyfriend was scrutinized, as partners often are, but there was no evidence tying him to the disappearance. Her family remained vocal that he cooperated, and nothing in his behavior or movements suggested that he was involved. There were theories about a stranger abducting her, but that raised other questions. The scene at Jennifer's home was unusually controlled. There was a lack of struggle. There was a calm relocation of the car, and the removal of personal items without leaving chaos behind. And random crimes tend to leave noise. Then there is the disturbing theory about if this could have been someone who knew her routine well enough to intercept her at exactly the right moment. And this is where the conversation turns towards environment, access, and timing. Because sometimes the biggest misstep in an investigation isn't choosing the wrong suspect, but it's losing the window where the right questions could have been asked while answers were still reachable. Which brings us to opportunity. So in the months leading up to her disappearance, Jennifer had expressed to her family that she had felt uncomfortable around some construction workers at her condo complex. She mentioned that there was some catcalling and unwanted attention. That doesn't mean guilt, it doesn't mean blame, but it does mean opportunity, and that's an important detail in abduction cases. Another crucial element to abduction cases is time. Time in abduction cases is not neutral. In missing person cases, the first 24 hours aren't just early, they are forensically fragile, and they are critical. So because Jennifer's case was not initially treated as a crime, her condo wasn't sealed as a crime scene, meaning the police moved through it, and potential trace evidence, like fibers, fingerprints, shoe impressions, were unintentionally compromised. And in missing persons cases, the most valuable evidence is often microscopic and temporary. There was also no immediate neighborhood canvass that was conducted while the memories were fresh by potential witnesses. And by the time police pivoted into a possible abduction case, the environment had already changed. So it wasn't that time had just passed. It had erased both context and potential evidence. And once it's gone, it doesn't come back. And there's also the surveillance footage that was never seen and that potentially didn't block her face. This was in 2006, remember. And a lot of security systems overwrote footage within 24 to 72 hours. But there were nearby apartment complexes and gas stations and convenience stores, parking garages, and traffic cameras that were not checked. These could have been entire visual timelines, and they disappeared before anyone acknowledged that they could have mattered. And we can't forget that human memory has an expiration date too. I know that mine does. Asking someone what they saw this morning is very different from asking what they remember 2 days later. And construction crews move. Schedules change. workers rotate, and by the time interviews happened, that window had narrowed. And what did the delay in this investigation really cost? It didn't cause Jennifer Kesse to disappear. It narrowed paths to investigate, and it gave the person responsible more time, more distance, and more confidence. And it can't be understated how dangerous a person is if they're confident that they'll get away with their wrongdoing. A common misconception folks have about doing something wrong and getting away with it. Sometimes one could assume you get away with something and you say, wow, I'm so glad I didn't get caught. I'll never do that again. That's not how a troubled person with a proclivity towards violence thinks. Because if they do something violent and they get away with it, they aren't relieved and live their life like a normal person. If anything, it emboldens them to keep doing it and to keep repeating the pattern. And that's something people need to understand, that some people won't stop unless they're caught and held accountable. And that's part of what justice is. Questions that linger in this case are kind of too many to count. If this disappearance had been treated critically immediately, not because Jennifer was a helpless person, but because this behavior was so starkly out of character for her, would this case still be a mystery? That question haunts investigators, it haunts families, and it sits quietly beneath every re-examination of this case. Because Jennifer didn't just go missing, she broke a pattern. And today, we understand how important that is in ways that weren't fully recognized in 2006, 20 years ago, my goodness. Jennifer Kesse's disappearance exposed a major flaw in how missing adult cases were treated at the time. For years, many departments operated under the kind of dangerous assumption that adults disappear voluntarily unless proven otherwise. And Jennifer's cases dismantled that idea. Her case showed that behavioral baselines matter a lot more than your age. And the focus shifts from asking whether someone was just an adult to asking whether their behavior was out of character. And Jennifer didn't just go missing, she broke her routine. And today, those kind of disruptions are treated like a red flag right away. It also showed that preserving early evidence needs to be a priority. So modern protocols emphasize immediate scene documentation, rapid video canvassing, and early digital data preservation. Because cases like Jennifer Kesse's show that waiting for proof of a crime often destroys proof. Florida law changed in part due to Jennifer's case and another missing woman, Tiffany Sessions. Florida passed legislation strengthening missing person procedures. The Jennifer Kesse and Tiffany Sessions Missing Persons Act improved reporting requirements, increased interagency coordination, and emphasized urgency regardless of age. It was an acknowledgement that the system failed and needed correction. But in all those years, it left Jennifer's family in limbo. Jennifer disappeared in 2006, and despite her disappearing without a trace, no arrests were ever made. And there were years of stalled progress. In 2018, Jennifer's parents sued the Orlando Police Department just to access the files, and they received 16,000 pages of documents. So, 4 years later, in 2022, the case was handed to Florida's Cold Case Unit. And in 2025, investigators confirmed there was new DNA to be tested because there were now methods they could use that weren't available in 2006. There was a narrow suspect pool, and the case is no longer considered cold. So as of today, Jennifer Kesse is still listed as missing and endangered. The disappearance of Jennifer Kesse exposes many uncomfortable truths. One is that disappearances don't always announce themselves as crimes. Sometimes they look like a mourning that was never finished. And sometimes the most devastating thing isn't violence, but unanswered questions. Jennifer Kesse didn't vanish into thin air. That's not possible. She vanished into a broken system. Did the delay in her case doom this outright? No, but it did tilt the balance. In crimes like this, an offender needs time, distance, and confidence, and the system, as it was, unintentionally gave all three. And yet, the fact that this case is no longer considered cold tells us something. It tells us that people still care what happened to Jennifer Kesse. It tells us that stories like this stay alive because they matter, not for shock value or entertainment, but because change and action so often grow out of tragedy. Because true crime, at its best, is about the human condition, our systems, our failures, our bad decisions, and our huge blind spots. And the fact that we're having this conversation right now means that those things still matter and that Jennifer Kesse's story is still alive. Thank you for listening and letting me guide you through this story. If you found this valuable, please give this story a like and follow along if you're interested in complicated human stories like this one. Remember to stay safe and stay curious. I'm Ray Review, and I'll see you in the next dark story.